So I think you should be able to see my screen, right?
Yep, all good.
Um, so since the last time we had the plug, a lot of things came into an acceleration, basically, right? So a lot of plugins from the Kettle remix basically ended up in Hop. Uh, Maybe I can show you guys a little bit about the structure of the project right now. So core engine, those are things that have stayed the same. So everything is happening in the plugin section in the engines. Obviously, the work that Detard showcased earlier, it's all the Beam plugin. It's still a plugin that you can remove. So that thing adds a couple hundred megabytes. So if you want to have a leaner, smaller hop, then you can just remove that folder. And then obviously the debug folder, environment handling, and the stuff that I've been working on on and off for the past couple of weeks is obviously the Git plugin from Hiromu. Hiromu did a great job in Kettle, but it was very XU based project, and so we're porting that to the new plugin API, obviously to reduce dependencies and stuff like that. So that's coming around the bend. The first version probably will not have branching and tagging, but commit, pull, push, that sort of stuff will be available. Uh, there's also a bunch of features that should end up before I release into a toolbar here, just to avoid having all these right-click menus that we had. A lot of people couldn't find them, so that's stuff that's been going on. Uh, you know, if you guys want to see the whole changelog for the month of May, actually, um, so we do a monthly roundup, and it's actually quite impressive to see all the stuff taking shape so quickly. So Beam support, um, hop config is just some new thing that we've invented. I see people certainly in my company in Neo4j. Today I had another person struggling with Mantra in Kettle in the remix, which is Hop Run, obviously. And in Hop Run you specify an environment, but beyond that, things just get wild, right? So creating the environment was in there, and that is now all handled by a new tool called HopConfig. So HopConfig allows you to create environments, delete them, modify them, list environments. So I can do list environments to see what my environment looks like. I have Hop Beam testing, Hop demo, and these correspond to these in the GUI. But on the command line, you often don't know what's going on, right? It also lists the variable defined so that you can have an easier time of working with these things. You can also set the system properties, and in my case, I've routed the configuration file over to a separate folder here. Um, so I have a couple of hop directory set, and the hop config folder so this one basically contains a config JSON file which contains all the system properties that I want to set, so the defaults, but also the locale that you're working on, English in Belgium, the GUI properties, the icon size, the stuff that you picked, and then the plugins also can write to that. So the environment configuration, these are the things that are passed through in hop config uh, minus help. I think it was something like just enable the environment system, or just disable it, right? So those are the sorts of things that and open last year. So these options are in fact plugins now, and so you can go into the environments plugin, and look at the code. And this is now a configuration option where you can build plugins to say, okay, this is like a config plugin. What's it doing? It allows you to configure the environment system, and yeah, it adds not just a command line plugin, but also a GUI plugin, so that you can go to the options and in this environment tab, see these two same options. It's my hope that we'll add a lot more of these options to make Hop easier to configure and more versatile, and allow all the plugins and everything to be configured to a standard single configuration file. I think it would make life a lot easier. As you can see, we've also moved away from the .hub folder, the folder in the home directory. Everything related to where was I? Everything related to usage is the configuration is in here. There was another bunch of data related to all the things, the last files that were opened, that sort of stuff. The log file of Hop itself, that really doesn't belong in .hop either. So we've moved this to an audit folder. By default, these folders are shipped with the product. Config and audit come with standard folders, so that you don't need to configure anything. So if you just run by default, it will use these folders to drop the configuration. But you can reroute them, obviously. Now in the audit folder is a lot of useful information that Hop GUI, let's say in my environment Hop2, it stores the last used run configuration, the list of files open. So these are all JSON files. So these are all the files open in this perspective, right? So per perspective, it saves the list of things that are open. Even for the Git repository, what are the Git repositories that were last used, so that you can say, okay, I want to automatically open the last one that I used, so it becomes more like an easier task. So GitHub2 is the last repository that was used, and so that makes it easier to configure these things. It all works nicely together. So that's the sort of stuff that we have, right? Same for file usage. Every time there's like an event, you can save events in the type file in the group Hop2. So it's a simple hierarchy. Obviously, the idea is to have this audit manager, as it's called, pluggable, and so that we can save to other databases or even graph databases, right? That's obviously my goal, is to get more information stored so that the user has a more fluent experience. Okay. So that was all, comprised in these two little lines. Lots of plugins were done again. I know Bart and Hansen and the community has been struggling to get to the last ones. The last transforms are usually like the weird ones, right? The ones that are harder to do or have dependencies. So this will take some time, but yeah, we're in good shape there. I think people will find most of their steps available as transforms. Yeah, so WebHop is pretty cool. I think I should talk about this a little bit. Let me just do my own demo this time, and let's go to the project. So Hotasan has forked the Hop project, and if you build this thing, you end up with a Docker folder, and so you can have this build, and I think it's already built, right? Now, let me just see if it's still in my history, because I have it like a whole Docker. Uh, yeah. I think that should do it. So yeah, uh, so this thing is now running on port 8080. I think I have a button here somewhere. There you go. Well, as you can see, in the past, WebSpoon took like ages to get up and running. Now it's like the same as the GUI. It takes a couple of seconds. I think it's even faster than. There are some GUI glitches. So there's like an incorrect calculation of the font length. But if you have like a pipeline and let's say we generate a couple of rows. I don't know how many rows we want, and maybe some random data. And that should add sequence maybe. Sequence. So one of the things that Hotasan did was you can now create hops, right? So shift click or middle button click. These are the things that still that work as before. Everything else like zooming works as well. I think it's starting to look quite nice actually, and you can actually preview these things. So it's starting to come around to a usable platform. The things that are not working are things that seem trivial, but they're not, like saving and loading files. And the reason for that is that obviously the file dialog, there's no native file dialog on a web container. And so the native file dialog is something we will replace by a new dialog that will also incorporate all sorts of options for the virtual file system so that you can browse easily to HDFS, Google Storage, S3, and all these sorts of locations. But we're planning to build those as real plugins. What we're also planning to do for this new dialog that will also be available on the full client if we want to, is to have it support named locations. So yeah, that's a whole can of worms all by itself. I'll leave that for another time to talk about. But other than that, I think it's coming along quite nicely. So all these things like unit tests, there's a lot of stuff that just works out of the box. Environments even. Uh, so I think now what we need to do is have a way of actually browsing to folders, and then we're good to go. Yeah, pretty cool. Even the beam steps that Descartes showed earlier, they are available here. Beam input output. Uh, so that whole runtime is available, so that you can basically say, I'm going to create a pipeline run configuration for, let's say, Beam data flow, and with the new plugin system, it just pops up immediately. Uh, so that's all pretty cool. All these options for all these platforms are just available. So that all those things are really exciting, really looking great, and yeah, I can't wait to see this new file dialog pop up. And if anybody wants to help out with those things, you're more than welcome. We have plenty of work to hand out, and if not, then this should pop up in a few weeks, I guess. Yeah. Let's just continue the roundup a little bit. A lot of great work was done with, on the subject of containers, Docker containers. That's still ongoing, but Dieter, Uwe, and the others, they're trying to standardize and document a container that is really nicely usable without too much fuss, right? So it's something that people can inherit from and extend and embrace and change and add plugins and do whatever they want with it. Um, yeah, and Uber obviously is building a migration tool so that you can migrate your kettle job transformations over to Hop. Obviously, that since Hop itself is still a little bit fluid, is something that will continue to be ongoing until we hit a beta stage or a release candidate stage. Hopefully, in a not too long time. Now, documentation doesn't all sound that exciting, but yeah, the last week or so, a lot of stuff has been happening. Gretchen Moran of Pantau fame jumped on board and started building these diagrams. Michele jumped in, Michele, and yeah, so adding these diagrams really helps the user that's looking at Hop for the first time. What is an environment exactly? What's the hierarchy? So a lot of work was done there to kind of like improve that experience. On another level, we had Brandon contribute a whole video that I recommend that you take a look at, or maybe you've seen it past. And that is like a whole video with background music. It's really polished, explaining where to how what to do to get Hop up and running, from downloading and installing the Java runtime, Java 8, to downloading Hop, to unzipping it, running it. So I think really exciting to see this. We haven't even hit 1.0 yet, and we're already seeing these polished videos and documentation rounds. I think I think people like what they're seeing. If you look at documentation now on the Hop website, it's starting to become pretty cool, right? Everything from Hop GUI to the plugins themselves. All the, let's say, the database plugins. There's not a single transform that hasn't been had some documented. Usually, sometimes ported from the wiki or whatever, but it looks so much better than on the wiki or on the Pantau help page. So yeah, well done to the whole community, I would say. I'm impressed every time I look at these things. And the cool thing is that this is all written in ASCII doc, and it's submitted to Git, and so you can clone this repository yourself. You can actually edit these pages if you see like a problem. You can change these ASCII doc and generate a pull request on the Hop documentation side. And not only that, you can actually generate PDF and HTML offline documentation with ASCII doc. So that's very useful if you want to ship these things offline later on. Yeah. Then right now, what I'm working on is something that popped up like a week ago, and it's an issue with licensing. And the issue is the Pantau Metastore, and it's not really that big of a deal, except that it's being used all over the place. The Metastore is what we call a shared metadata environment. And just to show you a little bit, so if you have like a Metastore object, like a database connection, all these options like the name, username, password, hostname, these things are serialized on disk, right? So in this case, this is in the Hop2 test project Metastore relational database connection, and there is like a Postgres.sql XML file. Let me just zoom this for you guys. it's pretty much unreadable, right? So we had a Jira case out for this to remove class names from these XML files. But really, what we want is to convert into a JSON variant, right? And since we have actually a licensing issue, the original Metastore from Pantao was actually not Apache licensed when the Kettle project turned Apache APL 2.0. And officially, the Pantao Metastore online is still LGPL. So what happened was they probably just forgot about it. Now, this is going to be an issue for the Apache Software Foundation, and frankly, it's an issue for me as well. So I started to write a new one called Help Metadata. Again, I think Help Metadata is simply a better term for what it is, simply shared metadata. So Help Metadata it is. An easier API. It does away with a lot of the things that we don't want to know about. And so if you look at now a test class person here, where I'm trying to put as many things in here, we still have an attribute top metadata, but it only contains an optional key, and it also flags whether or not it's a password or not, so that we can obfuscate it in the. But all the other options that we've seen in the Metastore, they're all gone. There's a better way of serializing. From the developer point of view, it's less fluff. You should just annotate the class with hot metadata at the top level, and things like addresses. You can just annotate the attributes like before, and those will be picked up. The reason why we're not relying on a standardized serializer like Jackson is obviously because some people want to serialize to JSON, others might want to serialize to a database or to Neo4j, or. So that still remains the same. We want to keep that possibility on it. And for things like where we have interfaces that are serialized in lists or maps, we need an object factory in Kettle or in the Hop Metastore. This was handled by, again, serializing those class names and indicating this is a POJO. For our new way of serializing this is how that serialization looks of that whole tree. This is a map of attributes, very clean, just the bare minimum in JSON. And for those lists of interfaces, this allows us to map to certain keys, and the way that looks like is this object factory says, if it's class cooking, then it's whatever string. This is typically done in the Hop through the Hop plugin system that says, okay, what's the plugin ID for this class, and then I'm just going to save that one, right? And that allows us to say, okay, I have a class main interest. It's music, and this is the object. So this allows us to very go to the bare essential of serialization. It makes these pieces of metadata easy to interpret and also human readable and human editable. And that was one of the goals that we had. So we're solving a lot of issues at the same time: licensing, usability, and a lot of that stuff. So I hope you guys will like it. The downside is that at some point, all your existing metadata, is going to be gone. I don't plan to write a migration system for it because we're still fully in development. And for most part, I guess you can just re-enter the data. Nothing to be done about that. All right. So yeah, that's a quick and dirty overview of what's going on. I would say open it up for questions. Dan?